Welcome to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. Where would we be without electricity? It's needed for the majority of our living essentials today. It's what allows you to watch the show. Indiana is a state that heavily relies upon the burning of coal to produce electricity. With environmental concerns about fossil fuels and new regulations on energy production, what is our future? As a country, we have a challenge. How do we keep our convenient sources of power flowing and also protect our environment? With us today to unplug the complexity of these issues and energize our conversation are two guys who know a little bit about our topic. They are Steve Francis, who is the chair for the Sierra Club Indiana chapter, and Kelly Carmichael, the vice president of environmental at NiSource. Glad you guys are here.
Thanks, Keith. Appreciate the opportunity.
And there's not going to be a fight between the two of you, right?
I think we'll keep it civil.
Well, I noticed you didn't bring your helmet or your gloves or anything. So
No, we're friends, so we can keep it on an even playing
Well,
field.
I thought to start the show, it would be interesting to see how this really works. So I've always kind of wondered what happens when you hit the switch and nothing happens. The lights didn't go out or change or anything in the room. But this is what we may be talking about if we don't have electricity, right? You turn it on. Everybody's so used to this, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So this is really a convenience. Even the Sierra Club people like to turn the lights on, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we have no desire to see lights go out or people to freeze in their homes by any means.
So let's kind of understand the issue, and maybe as we start with the history of this. Why is Indiana rely so much upon coal? You said it's how much?
About 85% of our electricity is generated by coal-fired plants.
Wow. Why are we that coal dependent in this state, Kelly?
Yeah, it really goes back to the roots of energy in Indiana, where coal was an available resource. And at the time, there weren't the knowledge and environmental concerns that there are today, but it was an abundant resource, continues to be an abundant resource in Indiana. So it was by far the low-cost option to energize Indiana.
So the other 15%, did you say 85%?
85.
So the other 15% is hydro and solar and
natural
wind
gas, wind, solar.
So how do we compare, either one of you, to other states? I mean, is everybody else burning coal too, or?
Well, it's predominantly the Midwest that burns coal, because that's where the coal was when a lot of the electric generating facilities were originally built. On the coast, California, and in the East Coast, coal wasn't available, so they had built out their electric generation using the resources available. For example, hydro, and on the East Coast, oil was the predominant fuel of choice because it was available.
So, but West Virginia produces, everybody keeps talking about West Virginia coal. I mean, so doesn't that coal go to the East Coast?
Early on, it was difficult to get it up over the Appalachian Mountains, and flowed more into the Midwest.
And I think that there's a lot that comes in from Wyoming now too. Wyoming has opened up their land to coal mining, and in fact, Indiana has one of the largest coal mines east of the Mississippi, in the Peabody mine down in southern Indiana too.
Really? So that makes sense, Kelly. I never thought about that before, but in West Virginia, everything pretty much flows down the Ohio River, and so you feed the Midwest in the old days with the coal barges, right?
Correct.
Okay. Hey, we're getting a good history lesson here.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're bringing it in from Wyoming now, from out west, so it can come in to the Midwest. It's pretty convenient again, or at least go through us, right? So this is the culprit, right? This is it. Aren't you guys wondering where I got this?
Yeah, did you go down into a coal mine and grab that, Keith?
No, actually, I'll have to admit, this is what we burned when I was a kid to heat our house. I lived in southern Illinois, and a big coal mining area, and I shoveled a lot of this as a kid. I will tell you, pretty much like this, except it was covered with oil. And I think this still has maybe a little on it because it's getting on my hand. So what is so bad about this? What's this doing that's disturbing everybody?
Well, I think one thing we have to keep in mind that when you burn it, it has a lot of emissions that come from the burning of coal. It includes mercury that goes out the smokestacks, nitrous oxides that create smog, other types of elements that are dangerous to humans when they're not controlled properly.
So, so the federal government is now, the EPA has been around a while, and what kind of pressure were they putting on over the past 20, 30 years about coal burning?
Yeah, there's been numerous rules that have come out that have required reductions in the constituents that Steve talked about. At NIPSCO, the mercury, the nitrogen oxides, the sulfur dioxides, we've reduced them between 90 and 99% from our coal fleet. And so we've invested over $700 million recently to retrofit the coal units to take those constituents out.
So I've heard that from the NIPSCO people, NiSource people, for quite a while. You know, what we're doing now by burning is pretty clean. So you're saying 99% down?
Yes.
Is that satisfactory or not satisfactory?
Well, one thing to keep in mind with our clean air and water laws is that as the science comes in, as we gain more evidence on the impact on health and communities around the country, standards will change. We'll become aware that a sulfur dioxide is more harmful than we thought. That's what's occurred over time, and therefore regulations need to be updated based upon that scientific evidence.
So what have we been, so are we constantly having to upgrade then the burning process or the cleaning process of burning to make it better, Kelly?
Yeah, the NIPSCO fleet is largely retrofitted with state-of-the-art. So approaching sort of the limits of removal, 99% across the fleet. So further reductions, at least right now from coal, there's just not technology available, and you could get a real small incremental improvement then for further investments.
So I'm trying to understand, if we're 99% clean and burning, that sounds pretty good to me.
Well, except there's one constituent emission that has no controls on it at this point, and that's carbon dioxide. And I think that's the big debate going forward in terms of how we're going to clean up the energy infrastructure in terms of carbon dioxide and the health impacts of that through climate change. And that is something that I think is going to be very difficult to do with a 85% coal burning fleet in Indiana.
So the carbon dioxide is still 100% going out? Is that?
Uncontrolled at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no price on it, and therefore what happens when there's no price on an emission such as carbon dioxide, it's basically free to go up the smokestacks, and the market then does not reflect the costs that are imposed upon communities and the globe, the planet, from carbon dioxide emissions.
Okay.
The challenge with carbon dioxide is there's not a control technology that you can put on the back end of a power plant. So this is an issue that the country is tackling right now. It's very front and center with the President's Clean Power Plan. And the method for reducing carbon emissions is predominantly moving to other generation sources like natural gas, renewables. At NIPSCO, we have done some of that, and we have reduced our carbon emissions by about 20%. Since 2005. The country, it's important for folks to know the country as a whole has reduced carbon emissions by 10%. So progress is being made.
So this is the pressure from the federal government coming down and saying we've got to be more aggressive about reducing the carbon emissions. Is that?
Yes, that's what's being discussed right now. Up to this point, it has largely been voluntary or result of market forces such as lower cost natural gas, which has driven electric generation away from coal and more towards natural gas and renewables.
Mm-hmm. But the big regulation on the table is called the Clean Power Plan, which has just recently been released by the EPA and challenges states to develop their own plans, implementation plans, if they choose to how they're going to reduce their carbon emissions over a long period of time. So this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to be something that we have to work on for the next, well, at least 15 years and probably longer.
Well, let me ask you, Steve, ideally, what would you like to see? I mean, right now, if we made you president, everybody thinks the president has all this control, but if we made you probably more like the king of the world,
Benevolent
or
dictator.
benevolent dictator, yeah, where you really could truly control things, what would you do?
Well, I think we've got to look at how we can do it over time in a reasonable way so that the impact on jobs and communities is not so severe, but at the same time we aren't ignoring the problems that result from burning coal and through carbon dioxide emissions. So it's going to be 40 or 50 year, maybe even 100-year project in which we look at gradually reducing over time. You mentioned innovation early on. This country, it has an entrepreneurial spirit that can be unleashed if we get the policy right and we have the proper signals in the marketplace that say we've got to reduce our reliance on coal and fossil fuels, at the same time ramp up renewables and energy efficiency, which is the cheapest source of all.
So you're saying this is going to take some time to do.
It's going to take time, and it's not going to be turning out the lights, as you mentioned earlier, overnight. We've got to be careful about how we impact communities and that the electricity is still running, and I think the utilities agree that they play an important role in that.
Cool. Yeah. Kelly, I'll ask you the same question.
Right.
If you were the benevolent dictator, what would you do to change? I mean, what would you change right now?
Yeah, you know, the lay of the landscape now is such that new coal plants are not being built in the United States. The existing coal plants are aging and retiring, and that's predominantly why we're seeing a decrease in the utility sector as well as the United States in terms of carbon emissions. So no new coal. New generation that's being built when a coal plant's retired is natural gas or renewables, which has a lower footprint. And so we're seeing that glide path. And so it's not a question of if. The president wants 25% reduction across the United States. I have no doubt the U.S. will achieve that. The question is how quick and what the impact to the economy is.
Does that put us competitive to the world? Because I keep hearing these things about the U.S. is not moving as aggressively as a lot of other countries, and we seem to be lagging behind. Is that true?
In terms of tech, well, in China, their emissions have doubled over the last 10 years.
I've been there and I've seen that, so
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, and they have surpassed the United States and are in a rapid, almost exponential climb in carbon emissions. In the United States, we can produce goods and services at half the carbon footprint that they do in China. So from my perspective, the best thing we can do is onshore production. China will continue. They're making a commitment to peak emissions by 2030. But I kind of view that as a commitment without real meat behind it, because by 2030.
But that doesn't say where we are as a country.
Well, I think that what we got to recognize is the United States needs to lead on this, not follow. And therefore, the Clean Power Plan is a good example of reasonable goals, developing a pathway commensurate with each state studying how they can meet those goals, so that we can go to, or the President Obama can go to the Paris Climate Conference, which is happening, and or may have happened by the time this show airs, and lead the world and recognize that others are not going to take the steps necessary if the United States and Europe and Japan are not going to say how they will reduce carbon.
So you two are sitting here talking about this fairly calmly, when I think a lot of people would think environmentalists are yelling and screaming and hugging trees, right, and all that kind of stuff, you know, and think that industry is evil and doing all kinds of stuff, and industry is digging its heels in and going, you environmental people are nuts, we're doing the best we can. So how come you two aren't like duking it out here?
We have a lot of common ground. The reduction, I think directionally, we're aligned, and we are making reductions. And the real question to me is, and probably between us, is how soon. We want to make sure that that energy remains affordable, and as Steve said, does not adversely impact communities, our customers. And so the question really becomes timing, but there is so much common ground.
And I think that we have worked on common goals in the past. I commend NIPSCO for a very innovative program in this area in offering payments to customers who want to produce solar and wind power. They can lock into a contract for 15 years at a fixed rate and receive payments from NIPSCO. It's a unique program, unlike almost any other in the country. So we have the capability when we work together to get those kinds of things done. I do believe that we need to move faster, however, and Sierra Club is really pushing to adopt the Clean Power Plan goals for the state of Indiana. And hopefully the governor will see the wisdom in doing that by developing a state implementation plan.
This state moves a little slow on some of those kind of things. Am I being conservative about saying that? Sometimes very slow on things, right?
Because of its institutional background, what we talked about, the historical reliance upon coal, it's difficult to change overnight. I think that the state officials, rather than fighting it through lawsuits, which waste money, should probably get on board and help implement how we're going to do it as a state. How are we going to move forward together? Transparent, open process for developing that implementation plan, I think, is one that provides certainty to businesses on what the price of carbon is going to be in the future.
So why, you guys talk about this as common ground, but there are a lot of people yelling and screaming at each other.
It happens.
Why? Why are they doing that? Why do people have to yell and scream about this? Not
I don't
you two,
think,
but why?
I think sometimes,
you're around them, right?
Unfortunately, what we're seeing in our increasingly polarized society is that people respond when the yelling and screaming happens. We would like to see the response occur before we get into those kinds of diametrically opposed positions, that we work together in a civil discourse way to implement the changes that need to happen. I don't think there's any doubt that changes need to occur in the energy sector. It's a matter of how fast, how soon can we do that without disrupting electricity production for the vast majority of citizens.
It's usually yelling and screaming on this side, but on your side, Kelly, isn't it usually complaining about the people who are yelling and screaming on this side?
You know, people are always going to disagree, but where the real forward progress happens is where there's common ground. And I do want to circle back. It's important to note that Indiana has made remarkable improvements in the environment. I'm not sure I totally agree that Indiana is slow. Indiana is a manufacturing state, and as you know, in the region, we have further to go based on decisions that were made 100 years ago. And you look around Northwest Indiana, look around the state, there's been remarkable progress. The air's cleaner, the water's cleaner, and so I don't want to leave folks with the impression that that progress has not been made.
No, I tend to believe that in the stories I hear about Northwest Indiana 30 years ago is like, and where we are today is dramatically different, and we're still doing a lot of manufacturing. You know, this is kind of a question, if we're going to more natural gas, this is probably a really silly question, but not being a scientist, when you take all this natural gas out of the ground, what's left in that void?
Well, the natural gas, it's not like a hole in the ground
Okay.
with gas. It's locked up in rock. So so as you draw the natural gas out, the rock still remains underground, obviously.
So that's just coming, but there's a void there wherever it was, right? Because, I mean, it's a displacement.
But the fracking, hydraulic fracturing cracks the rock, and that releases the gas that's embedded in the rock. So it's not like it's not like oil where there's a huge cavern deposit, at least in terms of the hydraulic fracturing that's occurring. I would question whether we're going to just shift over to natural gas, however. I think that would be a huge mistake in terms of the Clean Power Plan, that we can't just go from coal to natural gas and expect that the planet won't continue to change and the carbon dioxide causing the change in climate. We need to really look at how we can use as little natural gas as possible to keep the lights on, to for 24/7 electricity, but at the same time weave in renewables and aggressive energy efficiency so people's bills won't go up. Their rates may go up, but their bills could go down if they're making their homes and businesses more energy efficient.
We're getting close to the end, but so where does NiSource stand about renewables? I mean, what are you guys doing with renewables?
Yeah, several things. One Steve mentioned around offering customer programs. In addition to the one Steve mentioned, we also have a green power program where customers can voluntarily choose to receive up to 100% of their power through renewables. On the production side, NIPSCO has 100 megawatts of wind and hydro. The challenge is that renewables aren't quite cost competitive. There's improvements being made, the costs of those are coming down, but they're not competitive with, say, natural gas yet.
So customers got to become aware of that. We're down to pretty much the end here, so each of you, what would you wish that the general public knew more about this issue?
Well,
got a
I'll
chance
start.
to inform them right here.
I hope the public understands that at least we're Sierra Club, and being the largest conservation organization in the United States and the oldest, is not interested in a program that results in our electricity not being there when we need it. But we do need to address the problems with this rock, as you mentioned, and that it's a process of continuous improvement over time. We need the stability of regulations that reflect health-based concerns, and also are regulations that are sensible in terms of not causing disruptive impact in our communities.
You just got a second, so quick thing.
We've made
Sorry about that,
progress.
Cal.
We're going to continue to make progress. We need to do it affordably.
I like that. I think you could maybe market that. Talk to Nick about that.
Where's
right?
Nick? Yeah.
Thank you both for being on the show. Really appreciate it. I think the public will get a lot out of this.
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Everyone should be concerned. We want power at our fingertips, but we also want a future. You can't deny that the environmental dynamics of our planet have changed over time. When the inhabitants of the Earth expand from 1,000 people to 7 billion, there is no way our environment remains the same. We have discovered this over time and have made great strides in fixing some of our mistakes, although many remain. At the same time, we have become very dependent on the convenience of energy flowing into our homes, schools, and places where we work. When you hear the conversation about how to balance energy production and consumption with the concern for our environmental future, it often sounds like a knockdown, drag-out fight. It's hard for me to believe that people who work in the field of energy production want to wreck the environment. They know they have to breathe the air, eat the food, and drink the water the same way the rest of us do. I also believe that environmentalists enjoy the warmth of a home, the flow of water in the shower, and the opportunity to bake in an oven. We have to figure this out. It starts with all of us educating ourselves about these complex issues. Those of you who have watched this show have a great start. Hopefully, you have learned a few facts and have heard some ideas which you can share with others. Suggest they watch this show from our website as a start. Continue your learning adventure by reading more and listening to information that can help inform you. Vote for candidates and support leaders who have an open mind for understanding these issues and the patience to work toward a mutual solution. We have managed to solve so many of our problems in this world through innovation, sacrifice, and using our intellect. Let's get moving on this one. I'm optimistic that we can figure it out. We hope you enjoyed this show and it brought light to your world. I know, there he goes again, the light thing on a show about electricity. I can't help myself. What did you think of the show or my previous comments? You can reach us at focus@lakeshorepublicmedia.org or through our website, both listed on your screen. Watch for our show on the big news stories of 2015 with Jerry Davich and Krista Zavanovic. It will air on the first weekend in 2016. We hope you're enjoying your holiday season. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. Until then, I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.